are.
Okay, I am Danielle Pricing, and I am a room rep for Mrs. McCann's class, and I have a preschool daughter in Mrs. McCann's, and I also have a first grader in
My husband.
and I have a husband. There he is. And I also have a first grader. So welcome everybody. It's nice to see so many faces here today. The other room rep, I'll let her introduce
I'm
herself.
Laura Ronland. I have Cleo in Miss McCann's class, and then I have Gus in 4th grade.
So if you don't mind, we would like to take just
Of you. Thank you so much for coming and taking time out of your day. I think that preschool years, I mean, you go to any grade level and they'll tell you, especially in the lower primaries, that those grades are magical. That this year is a magical year. And I really think that applies so much also to preschool. I started off as a primary teacher, lower primary teacher. And so in my years as first grade, I knew a lot about what happens for a child as they got to be 6, 7, and a little bit above. But it really has been when I moved into administration and specifically into the pre-K role as the dean that I have gained a better understanding about preschool, and they are unique little children. And that's probably no surprise to any of you. But they just, and so that impacts the way preschool classrooms look different than you would see in any other classroom. It impacts when you hear us say that a preschooler's job is to play. It has to be that way, just because of who they are, how they're wired, and what they do actually with that play. So I was thinking this morning, I think that, you know, preschoolers kind of start off a little bit like this flower bud, and then and when I think about the difference between this flower, and they came from the same plant, we can't see it necessarily go from here to here unless we have the miracle of time-lapse photography, right? And it feels like the same with little kids because there is so much that happens inside of them from this point, even the beginning of preschool until they get to be 5 or 6 years old. And what I'm hoping to do today, and I think Peg and Lisa are too, is to help kind of give you a little bit of that miracle of time-lapse photography so you can see a little bit about what's going on underneath. Because in some ways, they look like mini versions of their older siblings, but they really aren't functioning that way yet. So it helps. So one of the things to keep in mind is in everything we talk about, and you'll hear over and over again, is about the developmental range of children. And I kind of think about that as, you know, the equalizers on stereos, where you can, you know, move things up and move things down, and there's this range that's kind of the normal range, or, you know, the regular range, and then up and down and up and down. And that's how it goes with preschoolers. You can have a preschooler whose language and cognitive skills are really comparable with an 8-year-old, who has the social emotional development of a 3-year-old, and whose fine motor skills and gross motor skills are right on par. And so, you know, how that plays out is you might have a child who is running down the hall, bumping into things constantly, who's telling you and correcting you about the planets in the solar system as you're cleaning up playing house for the 12th time today. You know, it's all of those things come together, and each of those activities meets that child developmentally where they are in their growth. So 3 things I'd like you to keep in mind today as we're listening is your child 1 is learning the world through a really concrete perspective. They can do things over and over and over again, and they have to do it that way. So their ability to reason and logic is starting in the developing stages, but most everything is concrete. They learn through experiences. So all of these plain experiences that occur, children are learning. And they're so ego-centered in their thoughts, in their actions, and in their interactions. So those are things that that really play into school too, because in classrooms, we'll always start from the preschooler. You know, if we're doing some kind of an activity, it might be doing a letter that we might say, you know, can you do this? It's in your name, or is this letter in your name? Kind of a thing. So you keep it personal. So you really stay with where they live, and that is themselves, their family, their school. And so in those ways, we can keep kids moving forward. So today, my topic is, or my part of the topic is that developmental and cognitive perspective, which is pretty big. I get 10 minutes, which I probably used about 4 already. But, you know, the topic is huge, and so really what I did was think about it in 3 terms: play and learning, the language development, and the preschooler's brain. So in our play and learning, what preschoolers have to do is, and this is why it doesn't work to tell them things very often, and that's why the classroom isn't in a position of doing direct instruction. They have to uncover things. They have to discover things. And that's why they do things over and over and over again. And as a parent, I would liken that to how many times is your child, have they been in the bathtub? You know, and that whole idea of pouring liquid from one container to the next container. You know, the things that they're discovering when that goes. They still aren't able to see that that tall, skinny container can actually hold less than the fat, short one, but they just keep playing and playing and playing. They learn about displacing water. They learn about dropping things, and you know, those pieces, and then they also learn the social consequence of being scolded when water's all over the bathtub floor, and you've asked them to keep the water in the tub. You know, there's so much that they can control and so much that they can't control. But in that, and it happens over and over and over again. I mean, how many times have you said keep the water in the tub? You know, and it still comes out because it's part of that discovery. And that situation, the last time you did it, doesn't necessarily apply to the kids yet in the next bathtub. So that they're doing it over and over again as they really discover what's happening, and they have to be able to do that before they can apply learning and concepts to new things. So that's really important. That's why they can keep playing things over and over and over again, because they're still making connections and they're still learning new things from it. When we talk about play, there are 3 essential contexts that play comes under. One is the cognitive play, so that's kind of the exploring, learning, making new connections. There's the social, emotional aspect of play, where they're really learning how do they work in the world. And then the creative part of play, where they're actually applying new things to what they've learned. So those aspects all factor into the kinds of play that kids do. Our teachers, okay. The other thing that happens in preschool is you can't separate things into subjects. You can't separate them because all of it is so interconnected. I'm thinking of in a particular class where I have seen, like Benny was the other day, was sitting at his table writing letters. Well, another little boy next to him looked at that and thought, I'd like to do that too. And started writing letters. Well, that piece of learning from each other is so important in child development and in what happens in preschools. Even in a situation too, I saw 2 little girls. One had already figured out to draw a person. She could draw a head and a triangular shaped body. So the other little girl who was sitting next to her noticed that, and now all of her females look that way, but her men still have arms coming out their head and legs coming out their heads, you know, because she hasn't generalized that that's a body. To her, it's a dress. And it's kind of like the long Elsa dress, but it doesn't represent, for her, that's what it represents. So it is those pieces, and it's part of underneath. some of the things that are happening in her brain too. I think that art table is such a fabulous way to see what is happening in a preschool classroom, and that mix of the social emotional kinds of things that are happening, the academic things that happen where kids are working to develop their skills in being able to represent things, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes, and just the social interactions that happen. In another situation, and this wasn't at the art tables, two little boys were trying to figure out, they were working on a barn together. Okay, I'm lying, it's girls, and I think this is going to be a girl interaction. Sorry. Sorry. It was two girls, and they were playing barns with this little barn set. And one of the girls said they're sitting across from each other at a table, and one girl is right here and the other girl is here. And the girl who's here says, "Wait, I can't reach that, the barn." And the girl who's over here says, "Well, I can't either." And so she asked, "Can you reach this one?" So she couldn't reach the smaller barn that was farther away. And the first girl said, "Yep, I can reach this one, the one that's closer to her." So what they did was she moved the barn over to the little girl over here and said, "Now, does it work now?" She goes, "Yep, fine." And they just went on playing. But I wish I did actually have a video of it, and I wish I could have shown the video of it, because what you can see in that interaction is children working out problem solving. That, they didn't need an adult to get involved in that. They were able to figure things out for themselves. They're that social dynamic of being able to talk back and forth to say, "I need this. Okay, does this work?" You had there was a moment of tension of how's this going to go? Is someone going to, are they going to be bossy here, or are they going to move it forward and work it out so that they both can play? So it just happens all the time in preschool classrooms. The other piece about the play is one of the things that's necessary for preschoolers is to be able to own their learning. And so they can do that through play. What we can do as adults is really see how it gets played out. They almost give us a little window into where they are and what they're learning by watching their play activities. I think they're just today. I was saying to some moms that our custodians had blown a big pile of leaves onto the playground, and sure enough, as you can imagine, the preschoolers are there just throwing the leaves up in the air, rolling in the leaves, playing school in the leaves, doing all these kind of things, and just all through that idea of play. The world comes to them. So the other part of preschool, or one of the other parts of preschool, is this tremendous language development that happens between ages 3 and 6. So when children are 2, they have about 50 words that they have in their vocabulary. By the time they're 3, they're acquiring 50 words a month. So that in these years between 3 and 6, kids' language just explodes to between 8,000 and 14,000 words that they have available and are using. It truly is. So if you just think about vocabulary, the sheer volume of what they've built in vocabulary is amazing. But also, how they know how to use language, which is really another really interesting point. So they can use language to get what they want. We all have kind of seen that happen as far as parents and figuring out who to talk to, how to say things. They've learned how they've gone from that babbling stage and 1-word and 2-word questions to get what they want to full questions. They know how to question. They know how to ask questions. They know how to answer questions. They even know how to talk differently to a baby than they would to an adult. And so if you think about the social context of all that, that is really some fascinating learning, because no one sat down necessarily and said, here's how you talk in this circumstance. But they've watched that from, or they've learned that through watching and seeing and mimicking and playing it out. You know, every time they pick up their babies or every time they're playing with their little brothers or sisters, they play out how the world works. And that with that comes that expansive understanding about the underneath of language. And some of that, as you get older, is code switching. All of us know how to, we behave one way in a formal situation, we behave another way in a less formal situation with our friends, and you know, when we walk into certain places. Church behavior is different than restaurant behavior, and kids are learning all of that. And just in those couple of examples, you know, our little preschoolers have learned those kinds of things already and are really acquiring that. So they really get things from modeling, and they're using you and older siblings as a model all the time. I think the other piece about language is when it comes out, they actually show us that their ability to think and start to begin to think in the abstract. So I have a little video to show this.
These are the letters.
She's made a computer.
This is a mouse. These are like rods. Then this is a carrot and grass and a bunny's face. And then this is a little button and this is a little button. I was gonna make this as a mouse, but then I already had one. I was like, what? I can have two mouses. So this is a mouse. And then, like, you know, computers can't just be right there. I mean, can they? Well, sometimes. But
So, I mean, just that kind of following that train of thought. She's telling a story, we get to follow that story. Just listening to what does she know about computers? You know, how does she figure all this out? The first time when I asked her what the little bunny was, she said, this is a video my mom sent me. You know, and in this, she's living this. So, you know, this is really her reality about this. And I was lucky enough to be there with the camera to capture it. So, but all of that language is exploding. How am I? Am I okay? Sorry. Now we're onto the brain of the preschooler, which is just really another just tremendous thing. Our preschoolers, their brains are 70 to 90% the size of the adult brain. Yet the connections between hemispheres and parts of the brain are still going to be developing into their 20s. So you can see why some things end up getting out of sync. Right now, what our preschoolers are developing, their gross motor skills are quite a bit intact, and now they're really working on fine motor skills in school. So there's lots of pegs, and there's lots of things that you'll see in classrooms for kids to pick up and put places to develop those muscles and those skills. And it happens with lots and lots of practice. With preschoolers, as I was saying about the play, they need to explore deeply to be able to discover. So they're really into themes, and you know, if it's dinosaurs, they're all about dinosaurs, and if it's about bobcats and machines that make things work, and they're really doing that kind of exploring and trying to figure out the world through that. They need learning environments that challenge them and at the same time meet them right where they are, because they can become frustrated easily. So that's where being a keen observer as a classroom teacher, teachers know when to invite a child to come and play and use that social aspect of learning and say, hey, do you want to do this with me? And preschoolers will do it with them because they love their teachers so much and they want to please their teachers. And then other times where you could just say, hey, why don't you choose an activity? I've noticed that you are using math activities a lot. You're really, really good at that. And how about today sometime you choose a different kind of activity, maybe something off the language shelves to help develop the other kinds of skills too. So teachers, because our teachers really are keen observers, they know how and when and where to invite suggest and then kind of sometimes guide in that way. The other thing is some things in our brains we're born with those connections made. We're born to blink, we're born to walk. I mean, all of those kind of things, to talk. The one aspect of learning that is so important in school, reading, is not something we're born to do. We have to learn how to do that. So we're either born for things or we're taught them. And so that idea of, in our preschool classrooms, what you'll hear is teachers asking kids, for what sound does that make? And because we're wired for language, then we can go from the sound to something more abstract, the letter, and connect it to a very abstract concept, which is letters and letters to words and all of those kind of things. So we have to go again from where the children are to something that becomes a little more abstract. So then, in that way, they are using their art, they're using letters, and to represent things. So they're moving from concrete into a little bit more representational, and by their ability to draw and write and all of those kind of activities. So it's moving from concrete to a little more abstract. But the pieces in this are the social aspect of school is so important, and the social emotional pieces are really often at the core of where we are in preschool classrooms. So Lisa's going to talk a little bit more about, Lisa's going to talk a little bit more about those aspects of the preschool day.
Thank you. Excellent. I'm happy to be here this morning. This is great. I had the privilege of going to 2 high school reunions this summer. The 35th reunion of my husband's and 30th high school reunion of mine, both ended up to be this year. And we were there talking to friends of the past, and we didn't talk about English class so much. They were important, and they are why we are doing what we're doing today, but we talked about what we did, the good and the bad, the funny, the relationships we formed forever. And when you start talking about friendships and you start talking about high school or college, doesn't it seem like it's right there? It's what you remember. It's like those connections just never die. You don't have to see each other every year. They are just there. They're living. They're part of us. So of course, when we have children, a lot of our emphasis is on, I want them to have friends. I want them to have fun. How are they? Do people like them? Are they good with other people? And it becomes our focus. Now, of course, we're far removed from preschool. The relationships we have as adults or college or high school, thankfully, mature and grow, and we become different people, but we do become who we are based on those relationships. But for the point of this discussion, I want to go back in time. I want you to remember, because remember, we're talking about 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, and who they are as people, because that's who they are also as friends. So, I put together this slide. I know we come from different generations. Some of us probably had this little play phone, or the Simon Slinkies. I'm not sure what you played with. The doctor kit. What did you play with? I would like you to just take a minute, kind of loosen up, talk to the people next to you, and tell them about your preschool friendships. What did you play with? What did you do? What made you giggle? You've got 2 minutes.
When I was
Okay, so I have 2 sisters.
So that we buy them.
Yes. And probably being instructed as one another and things like that. Yes. I but as far as like this,
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry not to give you more time, but I would like to just take a moment. Would anyone like to share anything? Anything you remembered that made you smile about yourself as a preschooler? A toy you played with or anything you shared? One toy. Come on, we can do it.
We discussed that we don't remember anything.
Oh, there it is. They don't remember anything. What did he play with in preschool?
Well, do you remember your little monster, that big old monster? It wasn't necessarily.
My little
No,
mom
that
was
it
in
was
first or second grade.
you had a doll, but you did have a doll when you were in preschool.
Please,
I
yes.
was sharing, I remember having a pair of cowboy boots that were just like I don't remember my friend's name at the time, but he had a pair of cowboy boots.
Oh, it is very important to be like friends.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Fast.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Remember that plastic charm necklace with like millions of charms all over it?
Yeah.
Love that thing.
And it was so pretty, I'm sure. I mean,
Gorgeous.
absolutely, absolutely. You ever feel things are bigger than life when you're a child? You know, like I'm sure that was the most beautiful necklace in the world. And I'm sure you and your friend were actual cowboys when you put on those boots. Absolutely. You know, it is a magical time. The preschool years are absolutely the magical time. And as parents, we want to nurture that. And as parents, we care so much. And as parents, we would love to just kind of take over because you know a lot. And it's easy to watch them and think, oh no, and kind of critique it, and it's not necessary. What is necessary is to just know who they are as people and nurture that, and then watch them soar with their friendships. In fact, there's 3 main abilities that make a good friend. How they interact with each other, and those are the parts that you as a parent are so important to nurture, and you don't even have to be in the classroom. That's what I meant about staying back and letting the teachers take it when you're not there. If they have these 3 skills mastered, I promise they are doing very well socially in the classroom. If they can communicate with each other, have language, understand appropriate language or not appropriate language. When should we speak? How do we get to meet our needs? How do we negotiate with our friends? Empathy, how to understand what someone else might be feeling. How to relate to someone, how to nurture someone, how to take care of someone who might be sad, or to laugh with someone who's just hilarious. How to have some self-control, how when things are really too silly to bring ourselves down a little bit, or to be able to focus when we need to focus and stop playing with our friends. If we can focus on these 3 skills at home and nurture them, I promise, even when you're not there to help them with their interactions with other people, you will be there actually, because they'll have learned these things from you. So I'm going to take my 7 minutes now to just kind of highlight those 3 skills and what we can do as parents at home to help nurture them. The first is communication. Play games that elicit discussion. You know, it's real easy in today's world to just, everything is structured. You know, this is the rules. This is how you play it. It's clear and it's concise. And it's very important for us to let our kids make the rules. Make the games. Am I the dad today or am I the mom? It doesn't really matter. Am I the baby and you're the dad? It doesn't matter. Have discussions and let them create the games. Puppets, house. Maybe it's a board game, but instead of playing by the rules of the game, you just take out the board game and say, hey, you make the rules. What are we going to play today? And play it backwards. You know, be as expressive and as listening and using as much rich language as you can to help them find themselves. Win. Oftentimes, and I am completely at fault in this one, it's just so fun to watch your kids win and to feel good about themselves. So We lose, right? Win. They should lose sometimes. And let children experience losing and discuss the strong feelings that come along with it. If they're disappointed, it's okay. That's great. Well, yeah, we all have strong feelings, and we're not going to win all the time. But what a blessing for them to not only witness you losing, but then to feel it themselves and you to encourage them and to understand it. So that when they're with their friends in their classrooms and they do lose the games, and they will lose their games, it's all a part of life. It's really okay. Make FaceTime a priority. You know, it's important to just be there, whether it's a dinner time or a play time or anything you can think of, just taking a walk, to have that time for open discussion instead of a screen time or instead of a drive time, instead of doing something, being scheduled every second of the day, just to have a downtime, just to have a face time. It's important forever, but it's never more important than it is at ages 4 and 5 or 3 or 6. This is the time that they're learning through social interactions. They're learning to ebb and flow. They're learning to negotiate. They're learning who they are as people. And right now it's a beautiful time because developmentally, as Kathy said, they're egocentric. And that doesn't mean selfish, and it doesn't mean self-centered. It means egocentric. They're focused on themselves, which is exactly what they need to do so that they get a sense of self. Not so far in the future, they're going to start comparing themselves to others. And if they don't understand who they are as people, then when they start comparing themselves in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th grade, that's kind of hard. That's when some self-esteem starts to take a little shake. So now is the time to really help them, engage them, communicate with them, and help them get a really good, strong sense of self. Empathy. Use teachable moments to discuss feelings and emotions. And it doesn't have to be your feelings, although it sure can be. It doesn't have to be their feelings, although it sure can be. It can be walking through the mall. It can be shopping on a Sunday afternoon. It can be playing in the park. And you see a child crying. What do you think they're feeling? Let's think of a story. What just happened? Well, I know we don't know what it is, but what would make you cry like that? What do you think they're feeling in their hearts? What do you think they're feeling in their stomachs? What do you think would make them feel better? Well, let's see what happens. Oh, well, look, what made them feel better? They stopped crying. Do you think they're going to cry for a long time? And what made you, oh my goodness, do you hear them giggling? What do you think would make you giggle that strongly? Oh my goodness, you know. What tickles you at school? Do you ever laugh that much at school? Or are you ever afraid of anything? So always looking around. And even if you're watching a program on TV, the Disney Channel is priceless for having social interactions and playing them out. Talk about it. What would you do in that situation? What do you think would change the outcome if you did it differently this time? Kids really like engaging in those conversations, and they put themselves in a different place, but they most importantly learn that other people have feelings like they do, and their actions have a direct impact to the outcome. If it were to be different, how would it have changed the outcome? What could they have said differently to help them feel a little bit better sooner? Or to enjoy it so everyone could share the joke? That's a really good lesson for a child to have. And then labeling those feelings, giving them emotions, so that they know it's not always, I'm mad, I'm mad, I'm mad, because they don't have a word for it. You ever hear a child just have a complete breakdown and they're just having a very bad temper tantrum? And they do feel those feelings, but if they could articulate what they were feeling, they wouldn't have to show it so strongly. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know what I am, so I'm just going to scream until you figure it out. But if they can say, I am so frustrated because I wanted to do that and I can't, then they don't have to scream because they just told you, and then you can work out a different way for them to actually do it. Would you like some help? Would you like to try it a different way? I could tell you were frustrated, but I really like how you showed me that, or told me you were frustrated, so that we could work this out different. It's all in modeling, it's all in communication, and most importantly, it's all about having the words so that they can express how they're feeling, so that they don't have to just show it in action. And acknowledge your child's emotions without judgment. They love you. I see it all the time when I go into the classrooms because they always talk about their moms and their dads. It's all about moms and dads, and it's all about that love in the home. They love you. And sometimes, you know, you love them so much, but we're human beings, right? Things are getting frustrated, or sometimes we have our own slants on things, so they're telling you something, but you're listening in a different way. Or we try to talk them out of their feelings. An example of what I'm talking about might be, so-and-so looked at me the wrong way, they don't like me, they're no longer my friend. Well, we know that's a little irrational, right? You don't know for sure what they were thinking when they looked at you that way, and chances are they're still going to be your friend. But instead of just saying, oh no, don't think that, people look at you different all the time, it's not that way. That's a judgment. They don't feel that way. So instead, empathize. Oh, that look really made you feel like that? I can tell that really hurts your heart. That look must have meant a lot to you. And now you're afraid of losing them. Yes. Oh, I get it. Because sometimes people have looked at me and I've thought all kinds of things too. I understand. You know what I also found? Sometimes I misread the look. Sometimes that look didn't even mean it. Has that ever happened to you? Do you see the difference in how you communicate without a judgment? Accepting what they say at face value. Empathizing, even if it's completely irrational. And then gently bringing them to maybe a more rational answer. And if they say, well, that's not it. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not it. Would you let me know how things go tomorrow? Or, hope things work out for you tomorrow, because I'd hate for you to, be angry at the end of the day tomorrow. Chances are they won't remember tomorrow, because those moments happen and they come and go, and strong feelings are there and then they're gone. So, any questions? I know I'm talking fast, but if you have questions or comments, please raise your hand. Okay. Oh, and of course, self-control. It's important for all children. To support it, establishing rules and boundaries at home and being consistent with them. You might think that's just a common sense, and it is common sense. However, what sometimes we don't understand is how it significantly affects friendships. Not only just the peace and tranquility of your own home, but if they know that there are rules and that they need to follow them, then when they're working with friends on establishing the game rules of tag, or the rules of playing house, and there's boundaries, and they'll need to follow them, and things are more harmonious when they're followed. They just make better friends. When they are allowed to just make their own rules and get really mad and things change and go, sometimes they try that in friendships too, and it doesn't go well for them, and people get maybe a little bit mad. They'll figure it out, don't get me wrong, but it's just easier when they have those clear and consistent boundaries everywhere in their life. They bring them into friendship then, and they expect that of their friends, and they expect that of themselves. Keep a positive problem-solving attitude when it comes to social bonus. We are mature adults, and we have baggage when it comes to friendships, right? We know we don't want our children to ever be hurt. We know what it feels like to be hurt. So sometimes as parents, and I count myself amongst that, they'll say something and you'll just think, oh my goodness, that's just awful, and perseverate on it. I hope they never treat you like that again. You let me know. I'll jump in right away. And then the next day they come home, they forgot about it, by the way. How did he treat you today? And then suddenly it brings it up again, So what we need to do is meet them at their needs. If there was a bump in the friendship, empathize, love on them, say, I'm sorry that happened to you. What do you think you're going to say tomorrow? What do you think that's going to go tomorrow? How can you, or just help guide them through that conversation with lots of love and empathy? Well, it sounds like you have a great plan. I'm sure that it will work. Good luck. And then when they come home tomorrow, and if they don't say anything about it, just let it go, because chances are they forgot about it 10 minutes after your conversation. But if they didn't, and they bring it up again, then meet them where they are. And if you really do feel like, they've brought this up a couple times now, and I want to check it out, then call the teacher gently. And just say, they've brought this up a few days and I'm just wondering what your observations are. So you're a guider, but you are taking their lead. And if they're emotional one moment and then they forget it the next, then we just need to let it go too. But if they keep bringing it up and it feels like something you want to check out, then please do. But just always meet that child emotionally. Consider your child's personality and be proactive, especially when play dates are happening, right? If your child falls apart before nap at 1 o'clock, I'm making that up, but don't schedule the play date at 12:30 because it's not going to go well by 1 o'clock. If your child has a toy that they don't like to share, sharing is a big deal with socializing and children. And there's 2 rules of thought. Some parents say, you know what, we all have to share. You have friends, you share everything. I think sharing is really important, but to be honest with you, I think there are those things that are really special to a child and they don't really need to share it. However, if they're not going to share it, then they don't play with it in front of the people they're not going to share it with. So like before play dates, just go around and say, all right, which of your toys are you unwilling to share? Which of your toys are too special to share? Because while you have a play date over, you can't have that toy around because then it won't feel good to your friend. And put those away, stack them in a closet, put them out of sight, out of mind. All right, so everything here now, everything you are willing to play with your friend, absolutely, perfect. Let's do it at a time that you're awake and alert and everybody is happy. And then let them go and play. You don't have the sharing. I don't want them to play with that. Just think of things that, as your child is developing their friendship, bumps are normal. In fact, I'd be shocked if children didn't have bumps. In fact, I like bumps because those are learning opportunities. But think about the bumps and then be proactive to solve them. And if you're not sure how to solve them, you have a wide community of people who you know that you can call up and you can say, hey, this is my problem. Have you ever experienced that? What can I do? But it's all about being proactive and setting our kids up for some social success there. So that is my part. Any questions about that? Excellent. Well, Peg is going to wrap up our meeting here. And if you have any other questions later, feel free to anytime give me a call, stop by, email. Thanks.
All right, so one of the things that one of the strategies that we sometimes use in the classroom in lower school is turn and talk. So I'm going to give you 1 minute each. I'd like you to turn to the person sitting next to you and talk about what you've learned about your child in these first 5 weeks of preschool. Take 1 minute each. What have you learned about your child in these first 5 weeks?
Present, prepare, and all that. It's really helpful. And I think what you were talking about is helpful for other grades too. I'm like, I should have attended this meeting last so thank you.
These first 5 weeks. Let's see if we can hear from 2 people.
What did you ask? I missed that question.
What have you learned about your child in these first 5 weeks? Yep, so we're going to take 2 people sharing. Sarah, thank you.
My son is capable of self-control.
Josiah is capable of self-control. Yes, he is. One more person.
I've noticed that even though Ava is our baby girl, our youngest, that she's no longer a baby. She's a big girl now, and she can go to school, and mommy doesn't have to coddle her like I really kind of want to. She's very capable.
That's such an important thing to notice about your children, because as we've gotten to know them, they are all incredibly capable. And as a parent myself, I am a rescuer, and so, an enabler. Let's see, what else am I? A lot of things, right? And it's easy for me to tell you about that and not necessarily to practice that myself, because we have that innate sort of response to our own children, and yet we know, like Ava, they're very capable. First of all, I want to tell you how fortunate we are. You have just the most wonderful children, and they are a gift to us every day. And I'm so excited for you because your journey is just starting in this magical sort of experience called BRAC. And I know that firsthand because my daughter was a 2-year preschooler and she was 15 years preschool through 12. And it's really hard to put into words all of what that experience meant. And I feel so fortunate for you that you're beginning that journey. So I'm like the closer in a baseball game. I'm here to summarize sort of that triad of development that Kathy and Lisa talked about. The physical, the cognitive, and the social emotional. So in terms of supporting physical development, you know, I think that there's no greater gift than unstructured play and giving your children the gift of being outside. Some of you have probably read a book called The Nature Deficit. You know, we're not getting our kids into nature as much, which is one reason I'm glad we have the Real Science program, because our kids are outside doing science all of the time. But in preschool, I think the idea of being outside is to play. Think about the neurosensory connections that are made when kids are swinging and using their large muscles in that way. Or, you know, when I was younger, a long time ago, you know, at the neighborhood park there was a merry-go-round. And we would push it and take turns running around and jumping off, and all those experiences that help connect both sides of our brain and help our muscles grow at the same time. So I would encourage outside play as much as you can at the park. Practice those large motor skills, running, catching, jumping, hopping, crossing the middle line, all of those things, as well as the fine motor skills that are developed when you create an art center at home and your kids are playing with Play-Doh, or they're finger painting, or they're playing at the sand table. You know, quite often if you come into a preschool classroom, you'll see those sensory kinds of areas. And that's where kids love to be. They love to be at the sand table, or they love to be at the art table drawing. So create that art center at home and give your children the gift of being able to tinker, to construct, to play with Legos, as opposed to doing those things only on an iPad. So the iPad, I think, has its place in today's world with technology. Our kids are growing up in a technological environment, and that's going to be their lives. At the same time, it can quickly turn into sort of one mode of learning, as opposed to, you know, sitting down with a construction set and figuring out what is it that you want to build. And sometimes you want to build what came on the directions in the package, and sometimes not. Sometimes you just want to build something that looks really, really cool. So make sure you carve out time for some of those things. In the social emotional way, I don't want to repeat anything that Lisa has already said, but I think, you know, resist the temptation to control. That's pretty much what we do as parents. We want to fix it, make it all right, have it a nice, tidy package. And growing up is messy. We know that, and it's supposed to be. And so give your child that message that you know they're capable. Help them build that confidence that comes with being independent. Give them opportunities for responsibilities at home. I eat lunch with Stacy Moore's class, and so yesterday during cleanup, I was sort of going around asking them how many of them have chores and what are they? How many of them have responsibilities with dinner, clearing, pushing in chairs, you know, picking up after your food that falls on the floor? And it's amazing in 3rd grade how many students still don't have sort of those routine chores at home, and yet they're very important. They help build responsibility that they then transfer into school. And allow your child to make some of his or her own choices and decisions. You know, one of them, one simple one in preschool and kindergarten is choosing what you wear to school. You know, and you may think, all right, really? I mean, no, I'm not going to let you go to school with a purple sock and a striped sock. That's just not going to work because it doesn't match. And yet, on the other hand, what you've done then, if you've kind of taken away their power to make some control, to have some control over the little things, right? They're the things that really don't matter, but they matter to them. And so resist, again, the temptation to sort of micromanage your children and give them the opportunity where it's appropriate to make some decisions and some choices. And then, as Kathy already mentioned, you know, there's no greater gift than reading. Reading to your child, reading with your child, doing lap reading side by side on the couch or before bedtime. Look for books that have rhyme, humor, dialogue. Talk about the characters in the book. Ask questions as you're reading. Model the rhythm of reading. Model reading with expression. Laugh while you're reading. Engage your children in what literacy is all about. Play word games to increase their vocabulary. You know, that's a simple thing to do. You're on a car ride. Play 10 questions. Play I Spy road signs on the road. tease multiple meanings of words. So, the word dish, for example, your child might know in a very concrete way that it means something that you eat on. But what does dish mean when you use it in a sentence? I'm going to dish up your macaroni and cheese today. So begin to play around with words just in a very unconventional way, because that will help them as they get older. Promote thinking skills and reasoning by playing games together. Now, when I was growing up, and I took this as a parent also, and I think it really made a difference for our daughter, you can do a lot of things to increase your child's cognitive ability with simple things. So a deck of cards, you can play war, you can play matching games. One of the games that my mom played with me, I think every day, and I played it with my daughter Megan every day, was concentration. It is fantastic for increasing memory, and memory is a huge cognitive piece to learning. So get out those card games and have some fun playing those together. Things like the memory games. Now there are alphabet memory and animal memory and just about every kind of memory game you can buy. Or things like operation, where they're using those tweezers and trying to get the bone out and using those fine motor skills. So I think board games, we underestimate the value of board games and just playing and being together. And then, as Lisa said, the imaginative play is so important. I loved when Ruth Ann Swenson was teaching kindergarten at Breck. One of my favorite times was to go and see what her kids had opened up. They opened up McDonald's, they opened up the grocery store, they opened up the hospital. Kids love playing make-believe. So, get a cardboard box and tell your child to have at it. What could you make, what can you do with a cardboard box? Or in the summertime, have materials where they could have a carnival in the backyard. Just let them play make-believe where it's not just that you're running to soccer practice or you're having a structured activity. And finally, I think it's really important to ask specific questions about the day, because by the time preschoolers get home, they're tired. And what did you do in school today? You're not going to get a huge response off that question. But if you could say, what song did you sing in music, it might engage your child in telling you more about what happened in music class that day. Mrs. Mason, or tell me the best part of your day. Years ago, a parent shared that every evening around the dinner table, they would start out with everyone had to share what was the best part of their day. And it became such a family ritual and such a fun routine that when their children got older, into upper school, and would bring their friends to dinner, their friends really wanted to be part of that conversation, because who doesn't like to talk about the best part of their day? Empower versus enable, I already talked about that. I think that's a really important thing. I think it's important to model curiosity, to wonder out loud, to ask questions out loud about what's happening, kind of to play with abandon and arrange play dates, but don't necessarily arrange the activity at the play date, right? Don't have the whole play date structured out. Give your children time to figure that out for themselves. I think probably the most important thing up here on this particular slide is getting to know your child's friends, parents. You are going to be on a long journey together. And so it's going to be really important to use each other as resources, to become friends with each other, but more importantly, to become acquainted with, what are the values that you have in your home. That's going to be an important question when your children get to middle school. When they get into upper school, sort of what are the rules of the game? And if you know each other well enough, you can support each other when those bigger questions come and the bigger decisions have to be made. And stand firm. Don't be afraid as your children get older. Even in preschool, don't be afraid to be the parent. You're the parent and your child's the child. And that's how it goes. And then, at Breck, I think one of the most wonderful things is the way that our teachers want to engage with you. This is truly a partnership. It's all of us together raising all of our children. And so, when you're feeling joyful, we want to know that funny story that happened before bed, because we want to be joyful with your child about that. When you're feeling down, we're down too. We're raising the same children together. And so partner with your teachers, read their blog to get a window into what's happening in the classroom. I just read Carrie Marshall's blog on Friday, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, what a gift as a parent. I have a snapshot into what's happening in my child's day. So make sure you ask the questions that you want to ask. If they're easy questions, super. If they're really tough questions that make us think or maybe even reevaluate something that we're doing, all the better. So make sure you ask the questions and partner with us along the way. It's just a great time, I think, to be a parent, the parent of a preschooler. Live in the present moment. You'll turn around, like I'm thinking now, what happened? You know, Megan used to say, I think those of you back to school and I heard my story about the little white bench. It was yesterday that she was on the little white bench and today she's 32. What happened to that time? So live in the present. Enjoy this time, the preschool year. It's really a special time. So thank you so much for coming today. Anybody have any questions or comments that you'd like to share? Sure appreciate you taking the time out of a busy life to come to the preschool parent meeting. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. How nice to meet you.